To our second spring webinar for the National Association of Medical Minority Educators, sponsored here at the University of Hawaii Department of Native Hawaiian Health within the Johnny Burns School of Medicine. I am Dr. Malia Lee, family practitioner with the Native Hawaiian Center of Excellence. And I want to thank our coordinators, Dr. Vanessa Wong and Kimberly Yamaguchi, for putting things together. We have a great lineup for everyone today. We have about, well, a little bit more than 40 participants online through our Zoom connection. So please, if everyone could mute their speakers except for our speaker, then we'll be more, less likely to receive a lot of feedback during the webinar. Dr. Peter Corridon will be speaking with us this morning, followed by Thomas Landefeld and Christina Goode. And I will leave it up to Ms. Kim Yamauchi to provide an introduction.
Afade, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It feels so weird to be speaking to a camera. But I am the Western Region Nominations and Elections Chair for NAMME, and I have the pleasure of introducing our very first speaker, Dr. Peter Corridon. Dr. Corridon is a clinical instructor at the Department of Craniofacial Biology at the University of Colorado School of Dental Medicine. He's a medical biophysicist, inventor, and entrepreneur who possesses distinctive training in teaching and research in the fields of biomedicine, microvascular surgery, mathematics, physics, and engineering. He teaches, his teaching interests focus on exploring ways to integrate technology into teaching to enhance student engagement. His research focuses microvascular remodeling that supports tissue and organ regeneration and the use of functional dynamic imaging to study these processes. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Corridon.
Well, thank you so much for that kind introduction. Well, my apologies, I didn't expect the clap, but thank you for the clap as well. I just want to say hi to everyone and hello to friends that I've been accustomed to, and also just want to say hi to those who are probably new to the work that we're doing. Nevertheless, I want to take some time today to talk about our work at the University of Colorado. Can you all just let me know, are you all able to see my screen?
Yep, I see it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for that feedback. So, based on the work that I've been lucky to be a part of for the past couple of years, we've been working to try to make changes, significant amount of changes, and we've actually been very successful at that. And I'll talk to you about that. But most of this stuff was actually spearheaded by a dear friend and also a mentor of mine. He was actually a mentor to me while I was doing my PhD. So if it were not for his efforts back then, I would not be here with you all today. And in turn, we would not be responsible, which I can say proudly, for roughly 40 to 50 dentists that will be coming out within the next 3 to 4 years. So this model provides basically a way in which we've actually increased the underrepresented practitioner population in our dental communities. So I make mention again to Dr. Kenneth Durgins. So for this, I want to give you all 3 things, and hopefully these 3 things could stand out in your mind. Basically, we wanted to help incoming underrepresented students in their ways in which they can actually transition, and then proactively provide support once we got them there to make sure that they not just abided by all the requirements that they had, but they succeeded. And then try to improve the access and outcomes for these individuals who basically come from these low and or underserved communities. So based on that, I want to give you a little bit about where we are and where I'm coming from. So I'm coming from Denver, Colorado today. I'm at the University of Colorado. Well, prime institution, you've heard of the Anschutz campus most likely, and if not, you've definitely heard of Boulder. Now, our campus is basically the stewardship within this region in terms of the things that it does. It's well known for its patient care, student success, continuing education, and research discoveries. Specifically in these areas, we're growing at a massive rate. We've just actually gotten the lease to take over an entire golf course, which is actually right next to us. And in this adjacent area, we're going to be putting up at least 4 or 5, if I'm not mistaken, research centers to augment what we have. So as you can imagine, we have a lot, but something might be missing. And this is what brings this talk coming in here now. In terms of the things that we believe that are missing, I'll show you something that I get to see each and every day as I walk in to work. So as I walk into work, we have our Hall of Fame, as you would imagine. As we bypass this, we can look at the classes that have spanned decades gone by of the University of Colorado's dental school. So within this history, you can see the various changes. And what I would like to make mention of is the class size change. So you can see we've gone from about roughly 20 to almost what we have now, about 80 within our regions. Now, based on that growth, we've not been able to grow in terms of our underrepresented populations. And this is why we're here today. So we actually tried to develop something that, again, supported this transition. So as you can see here, I'm sitting, in the middle of my group of students when we had this first transition program. This first transition program actually helped us not only recruit, but also help these guys to matriculate and transition. And I can say that the smiles on their faces, well, they're still there. Yes, hi.
Can you share your screen again with us?
Sure, let me try this again.
At the bottom of Zoom. Perfect.
Can you see?
Thank you.
Okay, all right. So I just had that dramatic effect one more time, and just wanted to let you know the smiles on their faces, which I mentioned before, they're still there. Not every day, but they seem to be happy as they're getting through, because as you'd imagine, a dental school curriculum is not one of the easiest. So how do we actually come about by making this change? We looked at it from a community perspective. And when I say community perspective, we wanted to help these underrepresented students who basically would be coming from communities that would be varied and generally would not have seen or would think that they would see individuals like themselves. So we wanted to kind of work with them on that. And again, as I said, do it in such a way that it was proactive rather than reactive. And hopefully, once we did this, we could have potentially achieved the goal that I mentioned. So coming back to my mentor, Dr. Ken Durgins, which some of you all may know, he basically worked on this in terms of starting this from many different institutions. So he's had the ability to do this in 2 institutions, and 2 of those, I've actually been a part of this, and I've actually succeeded from his directorship. So we were at Rensselaer Polytechnic and then Indiana University School of Medicine. So we've recognized that the work that he did provided these developments, and we decided, well, what were the key elements that actually brought about this success? And I tried with my mathematical mind and interest to try to really develop a model. How can this model work? So we actually call this model SLOPE. And I had a couple of friends of mine help me out with this. I'd like to pay mention to them, Dr. Watson, and Dr. Herrera. And in terms of SLOPE, we recognized that we will be going against some massive gradient, and not just some massive gradient, but we had an impediment on that gradient. So we looked at things that would actually help us potentially get across that. First of all, as you can imagine, we looked at the culture. Then from there, we looked at visibility, because visibility plays a massive part on the psyche, and it makes someone actually feel that they are part of a system, not just physically, but also truly integrated within the system. And we then went on to support, and then finally motivation, because as you'd imagine, we have wonderful coaches who help us succeed in many different areas. And we thought, well, isn't this supposed to be useful for us? Aren't we coaches? Aren't we the people who've been motivating and striving and working towards this sort of feeling to keep people going at their lowest? So for this model to work, well, we had to alter the culture existing in the dental school and try to broaden horizons. When I say broaden horizons, you had to start looking at the fact that, well, there was going to be a landscape change, and now wanted to alleviate some of the issues that people believed came with these landscape changes. We wanted to actually increase the visibility of our diverse communities and increase the visibility in a truly positive manner. Then we also looked at hiring initiatives to promote buy-in at different levels. So it's one thing if you have one champion for the cause, but then again, you can end up with diversity fatigue. So we tried to spread across this issue, spread across by having many different people at the highest level and down to the lowest level have buy-in. So lucky for us, we had a good team that stemmed from the chancellor all the way down to the human resource staff, and then provided a channel within our local communities to actually work with this. So again, what we look to do here is go beyond the Anschutz campus, look to see the individuals who will actually be benefiting from physicians and even practitioners in our cases who look like them, who will support them, and who will hopefully make them feel comfortable coming to the Anschutz campus. So this is our star-studded team, as you can see here, stemming from our Vice Chancellor, who we are unfortunately losing at the end of this month. She is retiring. Well, today is her last day, so we gave her a really nice farewell, but Brenda Allen has been a champion for the cause for many years. And as I mentioned before, Kenneth Durgans. Now moving along, we have the new Dr. Stephen Lenenberger. He just actually got his PhD, and Stephen has been really, really crucial in terms of his work with student engagement. We also have our Director of Human Services, Malika White. Then you can see myself down there with my little one. We've also actually recruited one of our top local dentists within the area, Dr. Collis Johnson. And he has just been phenomenal in terms of the work that he's done. And now, since our campus is actually known as the Anschutz Denver campus, we have a whole lot of help on the downtown campus that I need to make mention of. Individuals like Charlie Ferguson, who, as you can see there, pointing out to the students. Charlie has recently retired and is finding it hard to actually leave the campus because Charlie has so much of his DNA imprinted on our campus and in our students. And as I move along, you can see Miss Ton Wynn. Ton is just our fireball. Ton is the one who gets things done. And last but not least, we see her counterpart at the Denver campus, Trisha. So, well, as you can see one example here, starting off with the post-baccalaureate program. Our post-bac program was actually started off with roots in terms of trying to generate rural commitment and or even increasing the number of students from rural areas. Then Dr. Durgans came along through the actual stewardship of Dr. Allen, and his charge was, well, can we extend this? Can we go beyond the rural base and actually attract students of color from different backgrounds, through diversity, through inclusiveness, to see if we can actually help them in terms of a pipeline to get directly to the dental school. And we were able to do this. So the commitment and the agreement that we have for these post-bac students, they're actually guaranteed spots as long as they get a minimum DAT of 18 and also have a minimum GPA of roughly 3.5. So that's a great deal if you would ask me. Then we look at the younger generation. So we're not only relying on the post-bacs, but we're trying to get them post-high school. So these are two of our stellar students right here, Alexa and Connor. They have actually started up with us. We interviewed them from the high school level and have had the, how can I say, great pleasure of seeing them grow from high school students now into actual juniors. So these two have been doing quite well, and I foresee them getting into the program within a year's time. In terms of increasing the landscape of, how can I say, non-traditional students, if you will, at our Denver campus, we have a Kuwait program. So this actually takes students like Connor and Alexa, but we take them directly from the Kingdom of Kuwait. So these students, post-high school, interview with us and then make a 4+4 commitment. So they're here with us for 8 years. So imagine bringing these kids across and taking them from post-high school all the way up to full practitioner. Then they can actually go back and fulfill the needs of their government. Now, in terms of some of the work that we've done within our program to actually try to make this a success, we look at it from different levels beyond the idea of academics. We've recognized that through the nursing center within Colorado, research has shown that for us to actually make really good practitioners, we're hoping to actually make really well-rounded practitioners. Those who are empathetic, who can understand working in groups, and just generally really good people. So we partnered with Habitat for Humanity. And as you can see here, they're having a good time cleaning up in one of the restore sites. Now, we also looked at different ways in which we can work with them in terms of cutting edge technologies and things that we hoped and have actually put forward in their classrooms. So here you can see an aid for mental health. This young lady here is Dalal. She's actually one of the Kuwait students who's actually matriculated. She's in her second year right now and actually going into her third in a couple of weeks. She's walking a plank, and I'd let her take it from here. So these are some of the virtual reality simulators that we use to actually help some of our students and or even patients and communities, individuals work around different types of anxieties and fears. So she's literally walking on a balance beam that is several stories high and, well, technically afraid for her life. So she decided to not jump off of the plank. And then that brings me across to something now. So besides ways in which we can help them balance themselves mentally, we also tried ways in which we can push them academically. So as you can see here, one of our other students, he's literally inside a cell. And that to the top of it is a mitochondria. And I'd let you all take a look as to what he is seeing as he actually gets involved in terms of this cell structure. Seeing different molecules here, another mitochondria. So this is our real live immersion 3D system inside the living human cell. So as you can imagine, something like this would help a physiologist like me as I stand in front of them, trying to explain the real, true life 4-dimensional world that they see. And sometimes it's often difficult to recognize on just a 2-dimensional text. I think that was just a piece of ATP that just flew across there from the mitochondria, post-respiration. And last but not least, I wanted to play this one last. This is one of our students learning to do some dental procedures. And I was actually the guinea pig for this case. So as you see, we had them in the classroom, we had them in experimental simulators, and we had them surveying and doing proper work for the community. And again, it's just about finding ways, as you can see here as well, just keeping them together. So they were actually sitting down, recognizing counting teeth, recognizing all the different types of teeth that you would have. And again, this really helped them prior to coming into the dental program. And once they got in, life was a bit easier. Last one, it actually stopped working a few seconds ago. I was mentioning how we just kept them working together. And as we go by, not just have them working together, but we also found every opportunity to work with them and maintain this sort of unity. And it actually paid off quite significantly. So, talked about this Pontic program that I mentioned. We call this the Pre-Orientation Networking Transition Integrating Concentrated Program. So I know that's a mouthful, that's why we called it Pontic. And also it's actually quite useful from a dental community because literally it provides a bridge to a gap. So using this acronym, we developed a series of these things to actually work together and have our students work together. So what did this all come about in? Well, we were actually very, 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 very happy. I can't say very enough to have actually been awarded a HEED prize for last year's work. So we were recognized as one of the institutions for our commitment to diversity and inclusion, in particular what we did with our dental program. And in so doing, I can come about and tell you all now that in the end, we are responsible, and I say with so much pride, for making 50 new dentists within the landscape of the United States. So as you can see here, I will let them tell it to you in different ways. So here we had upperclassmen coming in to actually teach these students as well. So working along those lines of, again, looking at the integration, not just from the faculty and or staff, but having students integrate amongst themselves. So they had also a chance to work with the faculty that they would have met a couple months thereafter. So they're in the clinic doing a whole lot more, learning a whole lot of these techniques far earlier on and developing their hand skills. And they actually had me add this in for extreme dramatic effect. But again, as you can see here, working together, playing together, doing as much as we could have together within this period of 3 weeks. So again, getting exposure to the VR and AR modules, learning in different ways, again, together. And this brings us to the end of my presentation today. And I'd like to thank you all so much for taking the time. And I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We wanted to take this time to open up questions and answers. So if anybody has any questions for Dr. Corridon, please unmute and ask your questions. As we're starting, I wanted to point this out to you. I apologize for not explaining this earlier. Malama in Hawaiian is to care for, to protect, preserve. We felt that this was fitting for the presentation today. So what we do with our students. If anybody has any questions, please.
I have a question for Peter. In all the technology, is that something that you had to develop for your program, or was that something that existed? How did all that technology come about?
Sure.
You may need
Yes,
to share your screen.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, Dr. Lee, what was that?
Okay. So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so for this, it was a combination of things. So we looked at some of the off-the-shelf systems, basically the Oculus Rift. And from so doing, we worked with, well, luckily again, having or being part of such a large campus, we had a campus-wide initiative, and there's a center actually for behavioral development that has actually been working with us for some time now to develop these things. So we kind of swooped in at a really good time. So we were just really fortunate to have everything kind of together. And for the second year that we had this program, I worked with them to develop some of those other modules.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Thank you so much. Dr. Wang has a question for you.
Hi, Peter, it's Samantha. I might have missed it, but I was wondering, how long has the program been in existence?
So it's been in existence for 2 years.
Oh, excellent. And what is the criteria? I know it's for underrepresented and you're trying to diversify, but do you have specific criteria for those students?
No, actually, what we've done in a case to support this is that we've opened it up to any incoming student and actually made it unofficially mandatory for our minority students. So we've really encouraged them to make sure that they participate, expressing the need for it, and also opened it up to their classmates. Again, because we're not just trying to foster a bridge for them, we're trying to foster a place that they will be completely included in.
And how many seats, how big is the class and how many seats of the class does the program have?
Oh, sure. The incoming class is 80. And the first year we had 22, and the second year we had 45.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I have a question. How are you? Thank you for the presentation today. I was really excited to see all of the amazing things your institution is doing, and was just curious about the program where you have students coming from Kuwait. How do you help them transition here into the States? And then just in terms of the academic support, financial, and then transitioning away from their families, it sounds like. But how do you offer that type of support and build it into your program?
Well, that's an excellent question. And as you can imagine, you have people coming in post high school. So their liabilities on their own, they haven't really developed yet. So we took these kids, and luckily, I guess, again, looking at how things have worked within our universe, I lived in Kuwait for about 3 years. So, you know, them knowing this, me having a better understanding of their culture, their community, their language really helped. So when we actually spoke to their parents, and we generally took about 4 or 5 individuals. So we did not take that large of a cohort, something that we believe would have been manageable. And then to have me work with them in terms of, you know, coming through with that transition was also a plus. In addition to that, from financial support, the government covers all of their expenses. So they actually even provide them with stipends to live while they're here. So in terms of that, no. So they really set them up financially to really succeed. So they wanted to make sure that they had a partner who was actually very willing and very interested in their success academically. So that's what we came about, and hopefully I answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter.
My
I'm going to
pleasure.
turn it over to Dr. Winona Lee, who will introduce the next speakers.
Thank you.
Aloha mai kako. Hi everyone, I'm Winona Lee. I'm the director of the Western region, and I'm also the director of the Medical Education Division here at the Johnny Burns School of Medicine, Department of Native Hawaiian Health. I have the pleasure of introducing our next 2 speakers who will be doing a joint presentation, Dr. Christina Goode and Dr. Thomas Landefeld. Dr. Christina Goode holds a PhD in biochemistry from the University of Guelph, Canada, and a first-class honors degree from the University of London. After a short postdoctoral position, she began her career teaching at California State University, Fullerton, and began a tenure-track position in 1989. Her research interests are in the field of membrane receptor biochemistry and trace element metabolism. Dr. Goode has been the PI of numerous grants, including minority student training grants at the National Institute of General Medical Sciences and the Bridges to the Doctoral Degree Program. At CSUF, Dr. Goode served as Director of Health Professions Advising until 2015. Currently, Dr. Goode is the Associate Dean of Academic Affairs at Western University of Health Sciences, where she leads a special master's program to prepare diverse students to enter and be successful in professional school. A true advocate for both biomedical training and diversity in the health professions, Dr. Goode will be sharing best practices related to advocating for diverse students. Joining her will be Dr. Thomas Landefeld. Dr. Landefeld received his BA from Marietta College in Ohio and a master's and PhD in reproductive endocrinology with an emphasis on biochemistry at the University of Wisconsin. After completing postdoctoral fellowships at Cornell Medical College and Washington University School of Medicine, he served as faculty at the University of Michigan Medical School for 20 years. Dr. Landefeld's research in the area of molecular regulation of the gonadotropins was supported by NIH funding and resulted in over 50 articles in peer-reviewed journals. In addition to his research and teaching, Dr. Landefeld held various administrative positions, including the Assistant Dean for Student and Minority Affairs and Chair of the Subcommittee for the Review of Minority Applicants to Medical School. Dr. Landefeld is currently a professor of biology and the pre-health advisor at CSU Dominguez Hills. An avid educator, he teaches multiple courses, including human biology, endocrinology, minority health disparities, and a biology senior project. He is the author of 2 books, one entitled Mentoring and Diversity, Tips for Students and Professionals, Developing and Maintaining a Diverse Scientific Community, and his most recent book, Understanding What You Know, What You Want to Know, and What You Have Never Even Thought About. Dr. Landefeld is immediate past director of the Western Region, NAMME, and his illustrious career as a researcher and teacher has been accentuated by his passion and advocacy for URM students and their success in higher education. I will be keeping time and will let you know when there's 5 minutes left, and we will also leave some time for Q&A. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Christina Goode and Dr. Thomas Landefeld.
All right, thank you. Can you hear us? We're good? All right. Thank you for that, Winnie. We're going to try and share our screen now. Where's the share?
Yes.
Yes, we got it.
All
All right, so we're there.
Okay.
Anyways, this is what we've sort of been talking about for, it seems like, way too long now. And again, Peter gave a good introduction to this. We're going to be talking about all the healthcare professions. We're really talking about, what's happened in the last three and a half decades. A lot of initiatives, but not a lot of progress. So this is a very brief history. Some of you have seen these slides before. This is a lot of the medical school initiatives, particularly from AAMC. Beginning back in the late 60s, where it was recognized that the historically Black colleges and universities were training pretty much all of the minority physicians, and so the AAMC set a population parity goal. And then money started coming in, projects such as MMEP, 3000 by 2000, the Kellogg, again, AAMC in 2006, recently called for a 30% increase. The Holistic Review Initiative back in 2013, and of course the most recent effort was the 2015 competency-based MCAT, which had a lot of efforts behind it, including input from Howard Hughes, and was supposed to narrow the gap in expectancy.
Let me just say, just as a comment, what Christina was saying, how long this has been. What we've started doing is the talks we've been giving is asking questions, will this ever be done? You saw the title here, still working on this. So this is an ongoing process. It's just for many of us, for most of you all, realize it's just taking way, way too long. So we're optimistic, but at the same time, we have to be realistic.
And this is a recent slide from a publication last year showing some of the changes in racial distribution in the health professions. And of course, what we're looking at here is the change from 2005. These data were from 2014. Notice a lot of negative numbers there. Those red numbers are actually decreases in representation. So that second column there, African Americans, you can see decreases in all of the professions with the exception of dental, thank you Peter, and vet med. You see podiatry and vet med in Asian Pacific Islanders. Hispanic Latino is just about keeping even, except for example in podiatry. So the numbers are not good. We also wanted to show this. We're really trying to remind people that getting into medical school, or indeed any of the health professions, is only the first barrier. What we see and what we know, the data shows us that a lot more women, minorities, first gen, non-traditional students will actually take longer to get through professional school. This is actually failure rates on step 1 disproportionately in our URAMs. Take a look at that third column, that's Black African Americans, and you can see it's a typical 6 or 7 year problem. Also recognize that once you're in professional school doesn't mean to say you're necessarily going to get out of professional school. This is attrition data. Again, you can see disproportionate attrition rates for students of color. So the question is there any progress being made? We talked about the MCAT. We talked about how the new MCAT came in and it was supposed to level the playing field. This is some data that's sort of been recalculated, looking at the old MCAT, which some of us are very comfortable with, as compared to the newer MCAT. These are average numbers. And again, this is all published data from AAMC. The average old MCAT was 26 for white students, which related to a percentile of around 55th percentile. New MCAT, pretty much the same, 56th percentile is the average. Pacific Islanders are actually scoring higher, but in every other category, the new MCAT really hasn't shifted the goalposts very much. And then when you see what schools are actually looking for, it doesn't matter that 500 MCAT was supposed to be set at the manageable level. What schools are actually looking for is considerably higher. So you can see that 61% of the students that are accepted into medical school actually have an MCAT well above the 50th percentile. In fact, it's above 510. This is something that, again, I know we're focusing a lot on medical school, but that's because that's where the data is. This is showing MCAT score range, middle third 495 to 504 and upper third 502 to 528. And you can see, again, disproportionately first generation students, students coming from non-professional parents, students growing up in rural areas, students growing up in medically underserved areas, and our underrepresented students. Very, very few of them are actually scoring in that upper third. So to try to get diversity when we're looking at MCAT is going to be very difficult for us. This is something that is underused. This is what's called the EO indicator. And basically this is looking at education and occupation. So an indicator of EO1 is for students, or for applicants rather, whose parents have less than a bachelor's degree. And what we know is that this is highly correlated with MCAT success. Again, if this was used more heavily, we may be able to diversify, but just as early as last week, we gave this data at a talk, and I think only 2 people in the audience actually knew what the EO indicator was. And these were both advisors and admissions people. So that's the history, that's the progress. So are there any solutions? So this is where I'm going to turn it over a bit to Tom.
I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but it is very important. When we presented, as Christina said last week, to advisors primarily, which is maybe some of you and many that are out. What we wanted to really stress, and that we hope to make a difference in terms of their thinking, is some of those social factors that are preferentially affecting underrepresented minorities. And these are major ones that I'm not quite sure how many advisors really understand. Microaggressions, I teach a minority health disparities class. We had a discussion on this in the class. Everybody was involved in this because they relate to it. Certainly we know racial discrimination is here. It's always been here. Has it gotten worse? It certainly ain't gotten better. Many of you are hopefully are aware of the imposter syndrome, which again is something social effect with minority students. The stereotype threat. We know it's been shown a long time if a student identifies themselves as Black or as Hispanic, they have more likely not to do well on tests and in courses. Isolation, marginalization, this is what we're talking about with underrepresentation. The student is 1 or 2 in a class of 30, what effect does that have? And certainly that relates directly to the minority status stress. And then of course we know about implicit bias. So what we were really trying to do was say, look, you need to understand some of these things. You don't have to be Black, you don't have to be brown, you just have to understand some of these because these are the things that are affecting those students that you're advising that aren't necessarily affecting the students that are not in those groups. And so I think that when we look at the network, what we have to do, the advisors can play a very important role as gatekeepers in terms of recognizing this to then advise the students more appropriately as they go on forward to the things that Christina talked about before with getting in.
So very much along the lines of what Peter was saying, knowledge and advocacy is huge for us. So we've just put a couple of things up here. I'm going to start with just the first one and be very brief. What Peter presented is exactly what we do at Western U in our medical science, Masters of Science in Medical Science program. It's a professional master's program, and we have very many of the same best practices. Having a cohort structure, having people in there that are immediate assistance, giving them all of the support so that they're not only getting admitted into a professional school, they're getting admitted and well prepared to take it on. And in actual fact, we have graduated over 200 students, and it's a big effect, and they stay in that cohort. There's other case studies that Tom can talk about.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we really are concerned about is the holistic admissions, as schools are saying they're using now, because the holistic admissions is really not in most cases, an overall holistic admissions, but a selective holistic admissions. And because of that, certainly when I was on a medical school admissions committee, and I know Christina is now, the disadvantage essay, the diverse essay, the personal statement is so key. And as you probably know, if you work with minority students, this can say an awful lot about the student themselves and the pursuit they've had, the journey they've had. And with the selective holistic admissions, how many of these are going to be looked at? We had a UCLA admissions committee talk to medical school talk a while back that said they got 12,000 applications and do holistic admissions. And when he was posed, he said that, well, it's after certain metrics are looked at. So this is a major, major disadvantage for our students. If you take into account the things we talk about, the social issues, many of those things come out in those personal statements. And of course, at the same time, in terms of letter of recommendation, because many people writing letters have to be aware of those things to be able to write a letter that really says what the student is involved with. And then the final thing in terms of this is we know what the composition of many of the admissions committees are, whether it be dental, medical, pharmacy, whatever. Sean Harper is a very well-known, very good reputation advisor from USC, and he talks consistently about until there is more diversity in the memberships, this is going to continue to be a problem. So these again are going back to the previous slide, Tom, but there's a lot of social factors there that underrepresented minority students have to deal with that some of the other students don't, unless all of us, whether it be at the advisor level, at the admissions level, or at the instructor level, have to be aware of to be able to make a difference in terms of making decisions. As you saw, attrition rates are still something one has to be considered about even in professional school.
So the last thing that we probably need to be thinking about is a systemic change. Again, Peter, you set us up beautifully for this. Unless you've got people at all levels in the institution, people that can affect policy, can be advocates at every level, systemic change is going to be very, very difficult. We here in California are dealing right now with the David Geffen School of Admissions. School of Medicine admissions changes, they've just increased the GPA to 3.4. Okay, that's all right, but the MCAT to a 512, which is the 87th percentile as the threshold of entrance. So again, they say they do holistic admissions, but to even be considered for a read of your secondary application, you have to have an MCAT in the 87th percentile. And again, data from the MCAT AAMC shows that the average for an African American is 494 for Hispanic. I'm sorry, is a 492 for Hispanic, 495 low SES, about the same, 496. So well below this. So I don't know how we can affect systemic change. Peter, you've got some ideas. We probably should all be thinking about this.
And we don't want to go away totally negative. It's hard not to, but there are cases. I mean, I've had very good luck with my students with the old MCAT being lower and even the new one at certain schools where they really do holistic admissions. I've had students graduate from schools in New Jersey that now my students will look at that first. One of the gentlemen that spoke to us after our talk there was from Tufts Dental School, Peter, and he gave us some outstanding numbers of Black and brown students in their dental school. So there are schools that are doing this. The question is, as Christina just said, how do we do this systemically? We can do it within universities when there's people involved, they're doing this and committees are doing it, but we need to do it systemically to make the difference so we still aren't doing this 25, 30 years ago ahead when a majority is the minority that is minority now.
So I think that would be the ending point for us, would be to talk to NAMME. How can we make these changes? Who amongst us would like to step up? We're getting a little cynical over here. We need some more people input. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goode, and thank you, Dr. Landefeld. I'm going to open the floor up to questions. So if you would like to ask a question, please unmute your speaker and go ahead. Unshare their screen. Oh, and then,
I wish I could.
Can you unshare your screen?
I wish I could. I clicked something. You'll have to put up with us as we are, because we lost our tech person again.
That's no problem.
No problem. We can go ahead and go forward with questions. Any questions from the audience?
Yeah, I have a question. Here in Ohio. And, oh, go ahead, my colleague in Cleveland.
Hi, Dr. Schreiner. So my question was sort of related to the curriculum. You mentioned having a course on minority health disparity. How did you approach getting those issues integrated in the curriculum, not just as a single issue topic or a single case presentation, but instead a whole course that you spend a great amount of time on?
No, it's a good question. We're a minority institution. We're about 90% students of color. And with my experience and my dedication before, we didn't have a course. And so I suggested to my department, the biology department, to take it forward. And if you know anything about putting courses forward in the curriculum, it does take some time to do that. But it was very responsive. The university is very responsive because of the topic. And the nice thing about it, and I can tell you after teaching this now for 4 or 5 years, we cover everything. I mean, it's in biology and we talk about health disparities and people think biology, but it's really socioeconomic, cultural. And it's the best course I've ever taught as far as enjoyment because the students are all involved with it. So in our particular case, it was not as hard as it might be in some cases to get it go forward. We just said, these are issues that affect all of our students. We've even talked about having it as, it's not restricted to biology, but it's a senior biology class. We've talked about having a course like this for general education because the students need to deal with this in society. But the way to do it first is to go within the department, within the specific things. We don't talk about the biological factors very much. Of course, we know with diabetes and some of these, there are some biological factors, and there may be even some more genetic factors, but certainly most of these things relate to people's lifestyles. And so I read recently, I think in the Chronicle, where only 50% of the campuses in the country offer a health disparities class. And I think as our demographics continue to change, I hope that number will increase.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Any other questions?
Yeah, I had one other question here from Ohio, and I was just wondering, in the one table, it was showing the various professions and unfortunately some of the decline of the respective populations. And for medicine, would that include osteopathic medicine, or were those just AAMC numbers?
Unfortunately, it's all AAMC numbers. ACOM haven't done the greatest job in collecting the data. So it's pretty much everything we show is allopathic. Now, ACOM are coming around. They've done a lot better these last 2 years. So we're pooling some of that data, but pretty much everything that we present is AAMC data.
Okay, cool. Thanks for the clarification. And thank you for the presentation. It was awesome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just had a question. This is Winona Lee from JABSOM. First off, thank you very much to both of you for a wonderful presentation, very concise, but yet very important in terms of what you highlighted. My question is, for those who are advising our diverse students, do you have at your institution formal training in the areas that are considered some of the barriers, such as microaggressions, implicit bias, either for faculty or for students?
Oh, what a great question.
Yeah, unfortunately, the answer is no, but I think most of us learn. I talked to somebody recently who said they were never trained in pre-health advising. Many of us aren't. We've talked with the NAAHP for a long time. Should we put training in there? Because I learned when I got on the admissions committee. That's just general pre-health advising. It's not even talking about the issues we talk about there, where these are really issues that relate primarily to underrepresented minority students. So I think much of it, the answer is one just has to do some research on their own. They have to really open themselves up to understand these things and really talk, as all of you know, I mean, advising and mentoring to me is really about personalization. Unless you really know the student, whether you're writing a letter or whether you just advise them, you have to know their history, you have to know their journey. And so I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of books out on some of these things, but how much do people read them? It comes from primarily from just the experience that you gain.
And I think to add to that, there are some training things for implicit bias now. And I know certainly at Western University, we've even been talking about having all of our interviewers go through one of those sessions to actually recognize that they have implicit bias. But I think the other thing is to recognize, and we did this back at the NAMME meeting, really looked at some of the early childhood experiences, early adverse childhood experiences. And I think when individuals that are dealing with applicants recognize that this goes back to 3, 4, 5 years of age and accumulates, just that knowledge is important. This isn't somebody who's just come in with a poor GPA because they goofed off. This is someone who's had barriers all the way through. And I think so that's why we say knowledge is so important. The knowledge of how these students are coming in, whether they're coming in directly to your medical school or your dental school, or whether you're at an undergraduate institution, or even if you're at a community college, recognize how hard and what the journey is that these students have taken.
And it's a very good point. In a couple of our previous talks, we're talking about preschool. Black girls being suspended from preschool, which you're talking about 3 or 4 years old, and you're thinking about what effect that has on their educational pursuits from that point on. So we used to talk about the network really being from high school to college, and then we brought in junior high, and now what we really have to talk about is K through 12 and even before. And so it's really, as Christina says, it's really a knowledge of that. you won't know everything about it, but you have to realize for many students, for many underrepresented minorities, this starts very, very early in the pipeline. And addressing it at the advisor level is not the answer, but at the same time, it has to help at some point.
And I think this is why programs like our MSMS program, like Peter's program, the Ohio pre-program, these are all programs that really allow the students to find a cohort, to find a support structure, and to find other people that have had similar journeys. And so it helps a lot getting over that. It never gets over the imposter syndrome, but they recognize that other people have gone through the same journey.
Just one more thing to say, Winnie, is that when I was at University of Michigan and there was a lot of insensitivity to race issues there, they brought people in for the training type things that Christina's saying. And basically they'd go through a training and they'd put a thing up on the wall saying that they completed this training. As we know, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're no longer insensitive to some of these issues, but you have to start somewhere to do these. And so there are some courses and there are some workshops that are in place to do that. The person has to be committed and dedicated to make that change.
I totally agree. Thank you so much for an excellent presentation, and thank you both for all your good work.
Thank you,
I'm
Winnie.
going to bring up Vanessa now. She's going to be wrapping up.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Vanessa Wong. I'm the Budget and Finance Chair for the Western Region NAMME. And so on behalf of the Western Region, we would like to first thank our three wonderful speakers today. I know personally I've learned a lot in this short time that we've shared together. Peter, thank you for sharing about your wonderful program. This is the early success of your students. And then also congratulations on the HEED Award. And then to Christina and Tom, thank you for, I'm looking at the screen because our screen is over there. So Christina and Tom, thank you for sharing that historical timeline and the context of what we're discussing today. I know sometimes we work in doing this kind of work and we forget about all the things that have happened in the past. So thank you for kind of bringing that back to today. And then also just sharing with us and reminding us that advocacy and education is key in the work that we do. I think you've all shown that it takes a village, not just to support our students, but also to support each other in what we do. And hopefully this webinar has provided a venue for us to maybe form new collaborations with friends across the nation. We have lots of folks joining us from Ohio. Hi, aloha to all of you. I think as Malia mentioned in the beginning, this is the second webinar we've done with our Western Region NAMME. So hopefully this is something that we'll go ahead and try to continue and maybe get the other regions to also join in. So also to folks out there in Zoom land, thank you for joining us today. I think you'll, as most of us, I think we find that we've spent the last hour learning quite a bit. So thank you again for joining us. Just a couple housekeeping things. We do have an evaluation that we'll be sending to you by email, and the video link for today's webinar will also be included in that. So please complete the evaluation. We welcome any feedback, and certainly, hopefully, we can all stay in touch. If there's no other comments or questions, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up and say aloha and mahalo from sunny Hawaii.
Thank you very much.